Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Bakul in Somalia. Just a quick little note that that's not how they pronounce it here. It's I think there's like 3 syllables in it. It's like Bakul. I'm not even gonna try. It's very different from how they actually pronounce it here, and the way I'm going to pronounce things in this area is slightly different than how it's actually pronounced in this area. But that's okay because I'm doing the American English pronunciation. I always say it's like we say Paris instead of Paris, right? It's all a little different, so that's okay. In English we say Bakul, and that's what I'm going to say, Bakul, in Somalia. So let me start by zooming out here so you can see exactly where we are. Somalia is located in what's known as the Horn of Africa because it's shaped like a horn. But it's also located in an area known as the East African Rift, which you can see from above this big split in the earth here as this chunk of tectonic plate is ripping apart, and someday in hundreds of thousands, millions of years, it's going to create a little island. Not a little island, a very big island. But we're seeing the effects of that now, and it creates a very interesting landscape in this part of Africa, in Djibouti, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya, where up here it creates a very arid desert landscape, which is why we're on my tablet tonight and not on my atlas, because my atlas just shows this as a big blank space. It's not very interesting to look at, so we'll just play around on Google Earth tonight. You can see lots of little settlements around here, but the capital is Khudur, over here. Khudur. And you can really see this landscape here, how it looks very dry and red. Kind of reminds me of Madagascar's red soil. But if you look closely, it's actually all farmland. They grow all kinds of different things here. Let's see if the slideshow here shows them. Also, very tragically with the slideshows here, if there are slideshows, I think this is the only actual picture here. The only actual slideshows only really show some pictures that are actually here. A lot are either selfies or pictures that are clearly not in Somalia that got tagged to these sites. So we're not going to look at a lot of pictures. We're just kind of going to look at the landscape, which is really interesting because you see all of this barren, dry, arid areas here. But in this little corner, it's quite a bit lush, which is really interesting. That you can see all the little trees there as I zoom in. Which is really interesting that all of the settlements are in the more dry desert area and not in this lush area. And that, I think, is just tradition of the culture that's lived here for many, 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 many years. The main ethnic group, there's a bunch, but they're part of a kind of an umbrella family known as the Rianwin. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. I've seen lots of different spellings, so I think that's how it's pronounced. The Rianwin ethnic group. And they have quite a history in this corner of Somalia. They have quite a history in many areas of Somalia. So I'm going to be skipping the things about the culture that didn't happen here, okay? So I'm just doing a fraction of it. This area would have been part of the Ajuran Empire, which reigned during the 13th and 17th centuries. They fought against the Oromo, which are very prevalent in what's now southern Ethiopia. And they fought quite fiercely against the Portuguese as they tried to settle here after the 15th century, or during the 15th century. And they traded with the Swahili coast, which is just not that far here. The Swahili coast, of course, had contact with all cultures around the Indian Ocean. And in many areas here, all the way down to Mozambique here, but mainly here, they had lots of trading stations and islands and big important cities there. And one of the most important things that was brought in here was Islam, along with all the other different goods that were traded into Africa and out of Africa. You know, trading out ivory, slaves, African things, trading for seashells and spices, and all kinds of things going in and out. So they were in contact with that trading network all the way up here. They were replaced by the Geledi Sultanate, which controlled the area from 1695 until about 1911. And I couldn't find an exact date. It's around, I saw some 1910s, 1909s, because it's around this time that the Italians decided that they wanted this stretch of coast here of Somalia. And it was called Italian Somaliland. So the Geledi Sultanate signed a contract with Italy, which was like, oh, we'll agree to coexist, but Italy came and took over the region and made it part of their colony. Of course, Somalia would eventually gain its independence from Italy. But after that, led to some disagreements in the area here over how things should be ran. Political parties formed in this area, and as things became more dire in Somali politics, those parties turned into rebel fighters. And it really peaked during the 1990s with lots of rebel fighting against the Somali government. That would eventually lead to a couple things. One, it led to the formation of the southwest state of Somalia in 2002, which is essentially like this part of Somalia, including Baku. So, in order to appease the various rebel fighters and to stop the violence, Somalia agreed to split itself up into autonomous regions, and this is one of them. So the people here all pretty much the same cultures and values, so they formed their own autonomous government, which apparently, I was trying to read about it, maybe some of you can help me out, apparently doesn't exist anymore on paper, but from what I can tell, still functions. Let me know if you know about Somali politics in detail. Let me know exactly what's happening with their autonomous regions, because I read that it was dissolved a couple years ago, but that it's still a functioning autonomous region. I'm not positive. So it led to the formation of Southwest State, but it also led to the formation of various Islamist groups. And that violence led to a very dangerous Islamist insurgency called Al-Shabaab into the area, and they took over the region for quite a few years. This group, and I have to be careful with how I phrase this because of YouTube, but it is a Sharia belief, very, very intense, very similar to what's happening over in Afghanistan right now, outlawing things like music and dancing and severely restricting women's freedoms, all of those things happening. And they are, of course, very violent, ready to defend their ideals to the death. Hello. Full disclosure. Technical issues happened. I had to stop filming. It's now the next day. So, just pretend that this is all very normal and flowing into the next thing, but I'm doing my best. So, we were talking about Al-Shabaab and ignore any beeping sounds you hear. Technical issues are still happening. But thankfully that group was pushed out in 2014. And while the area is still not entirely completely stable, completely safe, it is much safer than it was 10 years ago. There's Baku. So yeah, that's pretty much where the history ends. Unfortunately, things happened right before I finished my thought. But listen, here's a good thing about technical issues happening here in my new filming setup. I'm in my family's basement. You can hear their basement fridge humming in the background there. I'm sorry. So I'm getting used to this new setup. And some things work, some things don't. But it's the next day, right? I came back to Hooder just now to check on the pictures here in Google Earth. And the pictures are wonderful. I swear that the last time I checked the slideshow, it was really terrible, but I'm looking at it now, and it's full of pictures I hadn't seen even yesterday. So let's check it out. You can see some lush green here. And the big little city here. A big little city. Administrative building there. And we can see a good aerial view of the city here, the capital city. Looks like maybe some wet farmland of some kind, and where some buildings most likely once stood. Because this is, of course, after the chaos of a terrorist organization taking over. See a little watering hole here by the looks of it. Some cattle grazing around. Big rain cloud coming over these acacia trees. But what I really wanted to show you guys, before even all that, was of course I looked around at all the towns here to find slideshows, and I didn't really find much. But I did find one very good slideshow. If it's going to pop up, I'd appreciate it. Let's see. Of course, now it's not going to. Down here, right? There it is. In this town here called Wajid. At least I hope that's how you pronounce it. This is my favorite slideshow in the region. I mean, there's only like 3, but this is the best one. Brightly colored buildings, big old watermelons. This got me craving some watermelon. I'm a watermelon fiend. I could eat a whole one of these by myself. But we can see lots of neat little school pictures here. And of course soldiers patrolling the area, keeping it as safe as possible. Here we can see a big schoolroom. And what's interesting is we see all these backpacks that are in United Nations blue. So I bet you that these were donated, probably by UNICEF, so that all these kids can have some backpacks to carry anything they need to and from school, which is great. There's more armed people and lots of pictures of schools, which I guess is like the most important things to take away from modern life here. Look at that beautiful archway, that's lovely. Is that kids are here learning, and maybe someday when they grow up with all the knowledge that they learn in school, they can bring more peace and stability to this area. And we see the pictures of the soldiers, hopefully keeping the peace and not instigating any more violence. Some cups there. And yeah, I think that's just the vibe of Baku, to be honest, is that there's still a lot of military things happening, but It's, from what I can tell, it's mostly a peacekeeping thing. It's not a violent thing nowadays, at least. And that people are very hopeful for the future. So, anyway, I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this style of content, please consider subscribing. Might be a little iffy while I get used to filming in a new location in a new state, but bear with me. And you're going to want to stick around because tomorrow we're heading over to Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, and we're going to see some beautiful museums and sites, and even Yanardog. If you don't know what Yanardog is, you're going to want to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a